I never thought I'd be in this position, sitting here, staring at my phone, the weight of a life-altering decision pressing down on me. It's funny how the past has a way of catching up with you, even when you've tried so hard to leave it behind. But I guess that's the thing about family. They're the one link to your past that you can never truly sever, no matter how hard you try. I'm a 35-year-old gay man, and this is a story I never thought I'd share. But here I am, using a throwaway account because what I'm about to tell you is far too personal for my main. All the names have been changed, but the emotions? Those are raw and real. Let me take you back to my high school days. Picture a skinny kid with thick glasses, more interested in books than sports. That was me. And then there was Darren. Darren was everything I wasn't: athletic, popular, and cruel. He wasn't just your typical high school bully. He was a tormentor, a nightmare that followed me through the halls and haunted my dreams. At first, Darren's bullying was generalized. He'd pick on me for being unathletic, for my glasses, for my interest in nerdy things. But I wasn't his only target. There were a couple of other kids who bore the brunt of his cruelty. It was awful, but at least I wasn't alone. Then came sophomore year. In a moment of vulnerability, I confided in someone I thought was a friend. I came out to them, sharing a part of myself I was still coming to terms with. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. For a brief moment, I felt free. That freedom was short-lived. My so-called friends spread the news like wildfire, and suddenly, my sexuality was the talk of the school. And Darren? He zeroed in on me like a heat-seeking missile. From that point on, I was his sole target, and my sexuality was his ammunition. The bullying intensified to a point that went far beyond typical high school cruelty. Darren's homophobic slurs echoed through the hallways. He'd shove me into lockers, leaving bruises that lasted for days. Once, he cornered me in the bathroom and threatened to beat the gay out of me. I lived in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, never knowing when or where the next attack would come from. The school administration was useless. They'd give Darren a slap on the wrist, maybe a day of detention, but nothing ever changed. My parents, well, they tried, but they didn't really understand. They thought it was just boys being boys and told me to toughen up. If only they knew the depth of the torment I was enduring. Those years were a blur of anxiety, depression, and self-loathing. I withdrew into myself, my grades suffered, and I lost what few friends I had. The thought of ending it all crossed my mind more times than I care to admit. But somehow, I held on. I clung to the hope that one day, I'd be free of Darren and this hellish existence. Finally, graduation came. As I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was getting out. I was going to college far away from this town, far away from Darren. I was going to start fresh, be myself without fear. And you know what? College was amazing. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I made friends, real friends who accepted me for who I was. I joined the LGBTQ+ society on campus and found a community that understood and supported me. I even got my first boyfriend, Mark. He was kind, funny, and made me feel valued in a way I'd never experienced before. Over time, the memories of Darren and high school faded. They became like a bad dream, still there in the back of my mind, but no longer dominating my thoughts. I was healing, growing, becoming the person I was always meant to be. Years passed. I graduated college, started my career, and built a life for myself. I kept in touch with my family, but our relationship was strained. They never fully understood or accepted my sexuality, but we maintained a polite, if distant, relationship. Then came that fateful Thanksgiving. I was visiting home for the first time in years. My sister, Ellie, had been talking about her new boyfriend for months, and she was finally bringing him home to meet the family. I was genuinely excited for her and curious to meet the guy who had captured my sister's heart. As we all gathered in the living room, Ellie walked in hand with her boyfriend. And there he was, Darren. The same Darren who had made my life a living hell for years. The same Darren who had tormented me, threatened me, made me question my worth as a human being. I froze. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. Surely this was some cruel joke, right? But no, it was real. And then, as if to confirm that this nightmare was indeed my reality, Darren opened his mouth. "Damn, Ellie," he said with a smirk. "You didn't tell me your brother's a fag." The room went silent for a moment, and then laughter. Ellie laughed. My dad laughed. It was like a punch to the gut. In that moment, I felt like that scared, helpless high school kid all over again. I didn't yell. I didn't start a fight. I simply stood up and walked out. I couldn't bear to be in that room for another second. As I left, I could hear my mom calling after me, but I didn't stop. I got in my car and drove, no destination in mind, just needing to put distance between myself and that house. Later, when I had calmed down enough to return, my family tried to smooth things over. They said Darren was just joking, that he was nervous about meeting the family. They told me that he and Ellie were serious, and I needed to get over my issues with him. I tried to explain. I told them about the bullying, about the fear and pain I had lived with for years, but they didn't want to hear it. My dad said I was being too sensitive. My mom said it was all in the past, and I should let it go. Ellie was the worst. She looked me in the eye and said, I have the right to date whoever I want. You can't dictate my life because of your hang-ups. That was the moment I realized that my family would never truly be on my side. They would always prioritize their comfort over my pain. So I made a decision. I told them all that I wouldn't be attending any event where Darren was present. It was a line in the sand, a boundary I needed for my own mental health. From that point on, I put distance between myself and my family. I stopped visiting for holidays. Our phone calls became less frequent and more superficial. I built a life for myself away from them, surrounded by friends who became my chosen family. Years passed. I heard through the grapevine that Ellie and Darren got married. I wasn't invited to the wedding, not that I would have gone anyway. My parents occasionally reached out, always with a guilt trip about how I was tearing the family apart. But I stood firm in my decision. Then, a few days ago, my phone rang. It was my mom, which was unusual enough to make me answer. Her voice was strained as she delivered the news. Ellie was in the hospital. She needed a kidney transplant. My mom explained that the rest of the family had been tested, but none were suitable donors. She wanted me to get tested because, as Ellie's full brother, I had the highest likelihood of being a match. As she spoke, my mind raced. Ellie, the sister who had laughed at a homophobic slur directed at me. Ellie, who had dismissed my pain and married my torment. Ellie, who was now essentially a stranger to me. And yet Ellie, my sister, the logistics alone were daunting. I'd have to drive 3 states back to my hometown, miss who knows how much work, undergo medical procedures, and potentially give up a piece of my body. All for someone who had chosen my bully over me, who had never stood up for me, who had prioritized her happiness over my trauma. I listened to my mom's plea, feeling a storm of emotions swirling inside. Guilt, anger, resentment, and a tiny sliver of familial obligation all warred for dominance. When she finished, I took a deep breath and gave her my answer. I'm sorry, Mom, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, but I won't be getting tested. The explosion was immediate. My mom's voice rose to a shriek as she called me vindictive, selfish, a monster for refusing to save my sister's life. I quickly hung up the phone, but not before her words seared themselves into my brain. Now here I sit questioning everything. Am I vindictive? Am I letting my past trauma cloud my judgment? Or am I simply protecting myself from further hurt? The weight of this decision is crushing. On one hand, it's my sister's life at stake. On the other, it's my mental health, my boundaries, my self-respect. I can't help but think about how different things might have been if my family had supported me, if they had taken my pain seriously. Would I be more willing to help now if they had stood by me then? It's a question I'll never have an answer to. Part of me wants to be the bigger person, to rise above the hurt and help my sister. But another part, a louder part, screams that I've spent too much of my life catering to people who never cared about my well-being. Haven't I given enough? Haven't I suffered enough? I know some will read this and think I'm heartless. How can I let my sister potentially die over past grievances? But it's not just about the past. It's about the present, about the family that continues to minimize my experiences and prioritize others over me. It's about setting boundaries and sticking to them, even when it's difficult. As I write this, I still don't know if I've made the right decision. The guilt gnaws at me, but so does the anger and hurt. I'm torn between familial obligation and self-preservation, between being the person society expects me to be and being true to myself. I don't expect anyone to have the answers for me. I'm not even sure what I'm looking for by sharing this story. Maybe validation? Maybe someone to tell me I'm not crazy for feeling this way? Or maybe I just needed to get it all out, to put my thoughts and feelings into words. Whatever the case, this is where I stand. A gay man, estranged from his family, faced with a life-altering decision. A decision that could save a life, but at what cost to my own well-being? It's a question I never thought I'd have to answer, and one I'm not sure I'm equipped to handle. So here I am, reaching out to strangers on the internet, hoping for something. Understanding? Advice? I don't know. All I know is that I'm lost, caught between the bonds of family and the need to protect myself, and I'm not sure which way to turn.